third presenter is Merin George, Assistant Professor, Department of English, GIAL, Kottayam. I invite you, ma'am, to present the paper titled Changing Cultural Landscape of Ageism During and After COVID. Over to you, ma'am.
No, ma'am, you're not audible. You need to unmute.
Yeah. Am I audible right now?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Okay. Hey, okay. Good afternoon to one and all. Okay, so today I'm going to present the paper which is titled Changing Cultural Landscape of Ageism During and After COVID. So whenever I used to hear the term ageism, I am always reminded of a famous poem, which is Sailing to Byzantium by W.B. Yeats. And the lines actually goes like this: there is no country for all men, the young in one another's arm, and birds in the trees, those dying generation. And I think during the COVID time, these two lines really haunted me, or really haunted the all people or all generation. Like there is no country for all men, and the other line is those dying generation. So when you look on to the COVID scenario, you could see that how the all people or this all generation need to overcome this barrier of ageism. So moving with this line of this William Butler Yeats, this line were actually written in 1926, and it is a statement about the agony of old age and the imaginative and the spiritual work required to remain a vital individual even when the heart is fastened to a dying animal. Through this poem, I was actually trying to give an intro to what do you mean by this ageism. And when you look on to this ageism, some studies show that ageism intersects with other discriminatory attitudes, including those based on race or gender or culture, leading to negative outcomes. However, the way the older individuals who are members of the diverse culture groups experience and acknowledge the age-based discrimination and react to ageist stereotypes in a culturally dependent way. When moving on to the word ageism, the ageism was first coined and it was first defined in 1969 by a psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Butler. And he gave a definition for this term ageism, which goes like this: it is a prejudice by one age group towards other age group. And in his later writing on the topic of ageism, he experienced by the older adults, and he says that he defined it again as a process of systematic stereotyping of and discrimination against people because they are old. And when we look on to the cultural perspective of ageism, we could see that usually when we look on to the different culture and everything, when we look on to the Western culture, we could see that they all give prominence to a youth-dominated nation. Or the young people are actually seen as the embodiment of valued beauty, vitality, longevity. And aging, on the other hand, is associated with disgust. Or sometimes we say that the aged people are considered as people who are non-productive, who are basically sitting in their house, or they are not given any opportunities or something. So we could see this culturally constructed norms which are getting attached with this age or this ageism. And this point of view of aging is culturally reinforced and supported, and characteristics were attributed to older people simply because they are old. And when we look on to the messages, or when we look on to the communication or the multimedia outlets also, we could see that when we take symbol or subtle expressions, like when somebody says that how many years young are you, or calls an older woman young lady, this all interpersonal communication actually reinforce the cultural norm that aging is something really which is bad. And such messages also promoted commercially also. And for the examples like they are merely considered as undesirable, or they are considered as people who forget things, bad drivers, sagging. All these terms are actually related or connected with this all people. So this is merely an introduction about this ageism. And when I move on to my core area, how this all people, how they were actually treated during this COVID era. And we all know that the world was actually hit by this pandemic, the COVID. And during that time, what happened is that there is the when we look on to this the Instagram, or when we look on to the social pages, we could see that there was a term which was basically called as this boomer remover. It was a term which was highly used during that time. And it is basically something which showed that actually this is a COVID is actually a pandemic which was here to remove this old age people. And when we look on to this word boomer remover, we should actually look on to how this word got originated. And this word was actually used, this boomer was actually a word used during the time during the Second World War. And it is a thing that a person who is born in US following the end of World War II is usually called as a boomer remover. So during the time when you look onto this COVID era, you could see that during the time, the Twitter, the everywhere, you could see that the COVID was considered as a boomer remover, which is again creating a negative impact upon the all people. Or we can say that it is something which actually promote this kind of discrimination, this age discrimination. And another thing I just want to quote here is that when we look on to the vaccines, or when we look on to how these vaccines were provided, I am looking on to this, when we look on to Indonesia, we can see that this vaccine was first provided to these young people, and they actually provided to the people who are below 60 years. And thus, all people were actually not given vaccine at first. And when what the government actually replied is that the thing is that the young people are going out, they are really productive, they are moving from the home and they are going everywhere, they are meeting people, so they can be the carriers of this disease. And on the other hand, what they said is that the all people are actually staying at home and they are not so productive. That was the reason they given. So here also we could see the trace of ageism, or we could see how the all people were actually treated during the COVID time. And another thing I just want to mention is that the messages, the alarming messages that we heard during the COVID time, like the people, the pregnant ladies, the old people, the children, they just need to be more careful during the COVID time. Actually, all those alarming messages are true, but when we go in depth, or when we go analysis of these messages, we could see that they have an inner tone saying that the old people are weak. That kind of message is actually given when we look on to this alarming messages. So through this paper presentation, I am trying to put forward the idea that how what is this ageism, and how this is culturally connected. All these things, actually, all these meanings, or all these words that are connected with this old age is actually socially constructed or culturally constructed. And also, what are the points that I can put forward during this COVID era that support this ageism, or how these all people were actually were made to put into their home as how this actually become a barrier for them through this COVID era. Thank you.
Thank you, Marin, for coming up with a very relevant subject for presentation. May we invite the next presenter, please?
Sure, ma'am. The next presenter is Vrinda Shandil, Assistant Professor, Dr. YSPG, PG College, Nahan, HP, India. to present the paper titled A Feminist Analysis of Kamala Das's My Story. Over to you.
Yes. A warm regards, ma'am, and all my presenters. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you can go ahead.
So, let me share my screen, ma'am. I hope my slides are visible, ma'am.
Not yet, ma'am.
Not visible, ma'am?
Not yet.
Okay, ma'am. Let me try once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they are visible. Can you?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So, ma'am, my topic is a feminist analysis of Kamala Das' My Story. So, at the outset, let me introduce the term feminism because I will be talking about the feminist analysis. So, feminism is a movement which is characterized by various ideologies, which is aimed at defining, establishing, and most probably defending the equal political, economic, cultural, and social rights for women. Because women, they have been oppressed by the patriarchal society, which is overwhelmed with dogmatic beliefs and parochial outlook. And the basic characteristic of this movement is the realization that men and women, they are unequally placed in society. Women, they are treated as a second category citizens, and their identity is based on the identity of the father or the husband, and later on by the son itself. Now this mindset of the sexist society, it has forced the women to play the preconceived gender roles. And a feminist perspective, it means to understand the oppression and the exploitation of the women in terms of race, gender, class, sex, and to find out ways to end this age old exploitation. From time to time, the feminist ideologues, they have tried to break these archaic, patriarchal, callous, and impregnable inhuman conventions. And it is basically characterized by the 2 points, that is men and women, they are treated differently because of their sex, and this unequal treatment, it can be overturned and it should be overturned by the society. And since ages, feminists, they have fought against the dogmatic beliefs and parochial outlook which has confined women only to home and hearth. The feminist leaders, they are leaving no stone unturned to liberate women from this sexist oppression. So now, Kamala Das, who has got the pen name Madhavi Kutti, and at the later stage, she converted to Ms. Kamala Suraya. She was also born in a conservative family, but later she acclaimed herself as a writer of poetry, short stories, and a memoir. The dogmatic society at that time, it was not at all favorable for the woman's desire of self-expression. But Kamala Das broke all these manacles of patriarchal society, and she moved forward and she gave expression to her feelings of carnal desires, love affairs, and even lesbianism. She was nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature. She was awarded with Pen Anthology in 1964. Then she was awarded Kerala Sahitya Academy Award, Asian Poetry Prize, and even Kent Award. Even the University of Calicut honored her with a D.Litt degree. Now coming up to the novel which I have selected, and it is also an autobiographical novel which is highlighting how women, And most probably not only Kamala Das, but even the women surrounding her, they were bound by this parochial outlook. It was a controversial autobiography, and from the very beginning, like a few writers, they would have stated that before marriage, women are treated well, but it was not so with Kamala Das, because from her birth itself, she was very lonely and neglected. Then at the school, she faced racial discrimination also. Like it was a time when even the people, they had a mindset that Indian people, they need to be treated as downtrodden. Then there was a mismatched marriage at a very tender age of 15. And after marriage, she had a turbulent relationship with her husband. But still, like an iconoclast, she wrote openly about her marriage, her desires, and later her liberation from all these manacles. So, I would like to conclude that in this memoir, we have seen that Kamala Das, she brought out herself in the society which was parochial, and not only she withstood the poignant traumatic events in her life, but even battled against all the odds and emerged as a very liberated woman. She is not only utilized as a new kind of writer, but even she had the power and you can say even the affinity to discuss her personal life in this memoir. This memoir is bold, daring, and self assertive. She grappled all odds to challenge the inhuman system of male patriarchy and projected the real aspects of women to be a human being at par with man. So, so that's all from my side, ma'am. Uh,
Ma'am,
ma'am,
kindly
not
unmute
audible.
yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Vrinda. That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful to hear how we can assert and learn from our trauma and win through our strength of character. The best tools that we can use. The paper explicitly shows that the power is within us. It depends on us how you make best use of this strength that lies within. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
May we proceed with the next presenter, please?
Ma'am, so the next presenters are the first two presenters, Dr. L. Fancy Mary Grace and Dr. S. Revadi. I hope they're not here. They have not joined yet.
Okay. Can we proceed? I guess, is that the number of presenters in this session?
Yes, ma'am. There are 4 presenters in total. We have finished 2 persons.
Yeah. And that was a wonderful session. I thank the host for having me with you today. It was a delight listening to new ideas that have been stemming out of all these wonderful sessions. I pass on the stage back to the host to conduct the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Subha Gora. We thank you for accepting our invitation and presiding over this session. Thank you for your feedback on the presenters, and I also thank all the presenters for presenting your papers in this session. And the next technical session will begin shortly. Thank you all.
Dear participants, in the next session will begin shortly, sharp at 5 p.m.
Good evening, Chivanendal present here. So now next move on to the next technical session. So I cordially invite Dr. Archana Tahur, Assistant Professor, Pandit Sant Ram Government College, Baijnath, to take over the session.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Myself, Dr. Archana Thakur. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
So, shall we start with the 11th technical session of the day?
Our second presenter, Naseem Ahmad.
So, Mr. Naseem Ahmad,
Yes, ma'am.
is he available? Okay.
Yes.
You can start your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I am sharing screen. Ma'am, is it visible?
Yes, it is visible. You can start.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I am Naseem Ahmed from CCS University, Meerut.
Okay, just a minute. Before you start, let me tell you the time limit will be 10 to 12 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. I
Kindly
will.
respect this time
I
limit.
will even limit it, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, I am Naseem Ahmed from CCS University, Meerut, India. First of all, good evening to everyone. Ma'am, I would be presenting my paper on titled as atrocities against Dalits in Rajasthan, ma'am. In this PPT, ma'am, the contents of this PPT is introduction, objectives, problem identified, hypothesis, research methodology, finding and discussion, scope and limitation. Ma'am, in the introduction part, I will start the caste system is predominantly an Indian crisis. It is more openly common in India than in any other nation. Hinduism claims the division of four castes. This includes four varnas: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. But Dalit didn't fit even into this caste hierarchy because they are considered lower than Shudras. They are dubbed as avarnas, devoid of caste, and their very touch is considered to be impure. Therefore, they are distanced from upper caste in every sphere of life. Moving to the next slide. Introduction is continue, ma'am. Rajasthan with scheduled caste population of 122.2 lakh ranked number 2 in terms of crime rate against Dalits, followed by MP, while ranks number 3 in total number of cases, followed by UP and Bihar. The history of discrimination and violence against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes have been very disturbing and practiced since time immemorial. The literature on the situation of these communities, particularly in Rajasthan, reflects the prevalence of social stigmas and taboos that are associated with the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes community in this region. Though the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes of the state have resided in the places away from human settlement, but still they have been a very disturbing past of violence and discrimination that has continued and adversely affected their present. Despite the existence of decades-old laws, untouchability is still somewhere practiced in nearly two-thirds of rural Rajasthan. Moving to the next slide. Ma'am, in this particular paper, my objective would be to identify the factors which led to the atrocities against Dalits in Rajasthan. I would be here citing the case of any one of the districts of the Rajasthan which has become a hub of atrocities. Moving to the next slide, the problem which I identify in this paper, the problem identified here is how a land deal turned into a bloody war, and the aim of this research is to understand the impact of it. Moving to the next slide, ma'am, I have taken a hypothesis here. Despite the existence of legal provision, that is Prevention of Atrocities Act of 1989 and Anti-Untouchability Act of 1955, the crime against Dalits are still a major problem, and any legacy in this regard needs to be viewed seriously. Despite of the flaws in implementation of legal provision, these provisions have provided SCs and STs with some sense of security, and open discrimination against Dalits have dramatically decreased. But it is also alleged that these provisions are frequently misused. Moving to the next slide, the research methodology which I have adopted. The research methodology adopted is qualitative approach, deductive logical reasoning, and descriptive design. Data will be sourced from self-administered structure questionnaire. Secondary, it will be collected from various online databases, books, journals, and company websites. Thus, will be based on both primary and secondary sources. As far as my proposed area of research is concerned, my particular emphasis will be on purposive or judgmental sampling, and the sampling will hopefully be collected from 100 samples. In this paper, actually, I have taken the samples from 100 peoples. They includes the district administrator, there are teachers, there are some intellectuals, and I will collect from those peoples by personally visiting to them. And this will be both the conceptual model developed for the present studies. These are the various statistical tools and techniques used for studies. Moving to the next slide, research methodology. For my proposed topic of research, I use the following sampling designs. Selection of areas. Actually, there are 33 districts of Rajasthan, and I have selected only one district, that is the Nagaur, which has become a laboratory for atrocities. There are 13 tehsils, and among these, my emphasis remain on Marta Tehsil of Nagaur because it is atrocities particularly inflicted in this very village. Selection of respondents. Actually, I have selected already. I told that I have selected 100 respondents to answer the queries about the atrocities, where the atrocities are being perpetuated. Collection of data, again, I will emphasize here. For the present study, the data will be sourced both from primary as well as secondary sources. Tools to be used, which I have discussed earlier, questionnaire, audio recorder, digital camera recording, etc. Moving to the next slide, atrocities. As far as the atrocities cases against the Dalits, in one of the important reasons for the Dalit atrocities. The number 2 is no proper implementation of SCSC Act, Prevention of Atrocities Act. Number 3 is the stupidity of some educated persons. Number 4 is lack of proper representation. Number 5 is perception, because it depends upon human perceptions, how the human takes one another, what is their approach towards the others. Moving to the next slide, case study. I have taken the case study in this very regard that it is sometimes become very difficult to cover the whole state of Rajasthan, but I have taken the Nagaur districts. It is my privilege to go in depth to certain the issues pertaining to the communities and do make this case study a successful discourse. This will be helpful for Dalit activists, scholars, media personals, and advocates. I am sure this will be read with great interest and attention, and the purpose of bringing out this case study will be served. Nagaur is one of the districts of the Rajasthan state. There is a village Dangavas. There is a village Dangavas in Nagaur district, which is shown in the map, just 59 kilometers away from the tourist town of Pushkar. In the same village, there have been 4 recent instances of Dalit atrocities, the most brutal of which is this recent one. Moving to the next slide. A questionable, actually in Nagore, a questionable land deal occurred in Dangawas, where Dolaram Magwal, a village Dalit, owned 23 bighas, 5 biswas of land. In 1964, Bastiram, his son, mortgaged the land for just Rs 1500 with the requirement that Chimnaram Jat would cultivate the land and receive the harvest without paying land rent. When the Bastiram's financial situation improved after 4 years, he paid back Rs 500 loan. However, the Jat refused to move away from that plot of land and said that Bastiram had actually sold it to them rather than mortgage it for money. This resulted in huge bloodshed. The untold story about the bloodshed went like, according to the first information report FIR, a mob of around 200 Jats chased them, beat them mercilessly with sharp objects, set fire to their possessions, including trolleys, razed a brick dwelling that had been constructed on the field. 3 people died on spot and others come to their wounds in hospital. The dead and injured were run over with the tractors. Moving to the next slide. It is said that tractors normally used for agriculture were now employed to crush the unarmed Dalits in this demonic attack. 3 Dalits were crushed and died instantly. Amongst those who died was a labor leader, Pokaram, who had in fact come to the village that very day to meet his brother Ganpat Magwal. Pokaram's assassination was perhaps the most brutal. He was crushed under the tractor, his private parts were injured, and burning pieces of wood inserted into his eyes. They descended on, it is the words of Pokaram, they descended on us like animals. Even the animals are not treated like this, said Arjun Megwal, whose father and brothers were killed. His mother Bidami was admitted to the hospital with fractured arms. The women were maltreated, their parts were targeted and injured in this demonic attack. Overall, in these attacks, 5 people were killed. 1 house was attacked, another kacha house set to fire. Property from this place is stolen. For about an hour, this dance of death continued. The village was reportedly mobilized to teach Magwal a lesson. Thus, if one were to examine the kind of atrocities perpetuated in this Dangawas region, one's heart would scream out. It is hard to believe that independent India is host to such crimes even today. Such brutality and cruelty of unimaginable proportions inflicted by one community on the another might even put terrorist groups to shame. Is this even possible in a democratic state? Apparently, yes, with the political and administrative system that initially refused to even take the notices of these happenings. Moving to the next slide. Findings and discussions. Moving on to the findings and discussions. Actually, I have selected the 100 respondents whose responses are here. 50% of respondents says that land is responsible for bloody war. 25% of respondents says that caste is responsible for the incident. 25% respondents says both caste as well as land have been responsible for the bloodshed. Moving on to the hypothesis-related finding. The constitutionally granted affirmative policies have had some positive impact, but the list continue to remain the most unprivileged class of Indian society. The hypothesis-related finding number 2 is that the lackadaisical approach to the law investigation and the prosecution of genuine atrocities cases have resulted in the denial of justice to many Dalits. Moving to the next slide. The scope and limitation. The scope for further study. The test model dwells for investigating other categories and to include new variables. Limitation of the study. Although the paper aims to achieve the research objectives in fullest analysis and accuracy, there are certain limitations because it is circumscribed to the Nagaur district only. The study could be affected by the respondent by us. Moving to the next slide. Moving to the conclusion, it can be concluded in a very lucid manner. After having an examination of for caption discourse on the caste violence in Nagaur district of Rajasthan, over suspicious land deals, where land has become a focus of attention for a common human beings to think on, which indeed offers an opportunity to the media personals, journalists, administrators, scholars, and educates, and specialists to ascertain some unknown and unforgettable truths. Actually, land has become a bond of contention between Jats and Magwals in Nagaur district of Rajasthan. It has given birth to caste-based violence, followed by revenge and counter-revenge. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Naseem Ahmed, for making this presentation. And I would like to say that the cases you cited truly showcase that caste is actually a human crisis.
Yes, ma'am, it is hampering the human sentiments. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, definitely.
Ma'am,
Also,
one thing
ghost
I
of
want,
reaching to the moon, but if we are showing this much of cruelty, this much of inhumanity to certain communities of people, then how can we even call ourselves human
yes,
beings?
ma'am.
This is
Yes,
this.
ma'am, definitely, sure, ma'am.
Mhm.
Ma'am,
Okay, then
actually,
kindly stay.
ma'am,
Kindly
I
stay.
want to expect my one more thing, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
I want more and more conferences in future because the students and research scholars, especially from Jammu and Kashmir, they are not yeah, comfortable to reach in-person conference, ma'am. So
Uh,
I expect more and more conferences in future. So I will get an opportunity to explore more and more knowledge and will make enriched these conferences, ma'am.
Definitely, definitely. There will be more conferences like these. Okay, please kindly stay for the question answer session, which will be at the end of this technical session. So let
Yes,
us move to our next presentation. Do
yes,
we
ma'am.
have Mr. Vicky Prasad with us, visiting faculty, Amity University School of Languages and
Yes,
University
ma'am.
of
Yes,
Teaching,
ma'am. Yeah.
Chhattisgarh?
Can you hear me, ma'am? Am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, yes. You are audible.
Yeah. Can I present my screen, ma'am?
Yes, yes. You can start your presentation, and the time limit will be 10 to 12 minutes.
All right, ma'am.
You can start.
Is it visible, ma'am? Is it
Yes,
visible,
it
ma'am?
is. It is visible.
All right, ma'am. So, good, good evening, everyone. Okay. So I'm starting my presentation, and the topic of the presentation, as you can see in the slide, the vulnerability of women in Shashi Deshpande's The Dark Holds No Terrors and That Long Silence. These two novels I will be covering with the analysis and some comments. So let's start the presentation. You can see the opening moves. I will be discussing the concept of culture. I will be also discussing the discourse of family. I will be discussing Shashi Deshpande as a feminist writer, and I will be discussing women and the familial image of women. And the last point will be discussion of the discussions on of the select novels. So starting with the first is the concept of culture. As we can understand, as Nehru has said, culture means the thriving of the human spirit, expansion of the human spirit. But etymologically, what culture means is that it's a word derived from the Latin cultura and colere, that means basically to grow or to cultivate. So you can see that traditionally what culture means. It means to honor and protect. But but by the end of the 19th century, we can see, or maybe during the 19th century and Europe, what happened? Culture, it basically meant the habits, the customs, or some kinds of moral traditions also, and taste of the upper and the elite classes, as we can see in some of the Victorian novels and some of the novels of manners. But now we can see in the 21st century, culture is largely considered to be as a dominant mode of generating and representing ideas and meanings. That means we use culture not only to mean that etiquettes and the habits and customs and taste and upper class, any kind of, upper class ideologies. No. Nowadays, culture represents many things. It encompasses, it influences many interdisciplinary disciplines. Now you can see these meanings and ideas propounded by culture, they are actually governed by the power relations. What kind of power relations? The power relation that happens inside that socio-cultural institutions, that elite culture. But in that institution, that elite culture controls the production of meanings and ideologies. That we can say the culture that being produced by these kind of elite classes, they try to take the hold of that culture. They try to subjugate other cultures, they try to subjugate the other classes, just because with the help of interpolation pointed out by the Louis Althusser, the Marxist critic. Moving on to the next slide. See, I have quoted one line, okay, one a quotation from Raymond Williams. Culture includes the organization of production, the structure of the family, the structure of institutions, which express or govern social relationships, the characteristic forms through which members of society communicate. But what does it mean? That's the quoted line. That means culture, it includes not only the production, organizational production. Actually, it means the structure of the family that I will be discussing in the next slides. The structure of institution too. How an institution is culturally connected, ideologically connected, and how it functions. The next will be that how the institutions and the family, they are governed by these social relationships and the characteristics and the characteristic form through which the members of the society, they communicate. The members of the society, when they communicate, they have to deal with the cultural nuances, and that is very important when we talk about, when we that we discuss in the cultural studies. Raymond Williams, as we know, one of the founding fathers, of culture studies. Moving on to the next slide, discourse of family, a discourse term given by Michel Foucault. That means largely when a larger body of knowledge is created on one idea, when it's when we keep contributing to one idea, and it through the end, through conventions, through traditions, it becomes a discourse with that contribution. So what normally we understand? We normally understand, by this term family, as Encyclopedia Britannica defines family as a group of persons united by the ties of marriages, blood, or adoption, consisting of a single household and interacting with each other in their respective social positions, usually those of spouses, parents, and siblings. That means that's the normal definition we understand. That a family consisting of so many members, whether they are related by the blood relationships or maybe the adoption or the marriages. But the discussion is that, the analysis is that, evolving from ancient community where used to be stay, early humans, they used to gather somewhere, they used to make community. And from that community, we have developed the larger concept, through the traditions, through the conventions, the concept of family. That signifies the structure of family on mainly three levels. What are those levels? The levels, cultural levels, structural levels, interactive levels, and functional level. Structural levels means when we understand the families, nuclear family, we understand. All right, joint family or the large extended family, this kind of. Interactive means how these family members, through their, in spite of their generational gaps, when they interact with each other, and what happens when the interaction fails, and the functions, the overall functioning of the family, whether it's functioning in a good way or maybe it's a dysfunctional one. That I will be discussing the functional and dysfunctional later. Family as the fundamental unit of society and directs behavioral changes of human beings. That's the family. That means a family affects the behavioral changes of human beings. Not a single person. If that person is staying with someone else, suppose if a married couple, they're staying somewhere outside the society, that they, of course, they are going to affect the entire society with their behavioral changes, with their behaviors too. So am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you, ma'am. So moving on to the next one, that's the continuation really. So as I said, the generational gaps in a family invite the contestation of power relations. That means, of course, we have the first generation and the third generation. When they interact with each other, as we have seen the stories also of Shashi Deshpande, which sometimes disrupt the proper functioning of the family. That means these generational gaps, they disrupt the functioning, the smooth functioning. So sometimes they're psychological barrier, emotional barrier that we encounter sometimes. The next point is, you can see family as a shelter of security and comfort. Of course, it's a security and comfort. And it's turned into a dominant insecurity, domain of insecurity. How it turns into a domain of insecurity and discomfort when the this function becomes dysfunction. Because of some ill sociological institutions disseminating the stereotypical ideas like patriarchy. Not only patriarchy, there are other ideas. When we try to exploit some people in the family itself. So patriarchy is the dominant one that Shashi Deshpande will be discussing in all of her novels. And it is pervasive throughout her novels how patriarchy manipulates the the most vulnerable creature, which is a woman. The most vulnerable member, as you can see, the female member, sometimes, often they are taken for granted. They are like subjugated. They stay in the confinement, even if they are educated, that means they are kept. The middle class educated women, they are kept in the confinement. And that is a concern for Shashi Deshpande, why they are kept. Even if they are ambitious to go upward, to touch that upward mobility. Exterior and the interior connotation of family, that means a family, of course, when a family is there in the society, the family as a unit, the family has to maintain its interior, like, member things, how it is functioning inside, and how that family as a whole, okay, is interacted to the larger family, which is society, as a microcosm. So it happens how these interior and exterior, these factors, they are like contrasting with each other, contradicting with each other. So that's in the discourse of the family. I'll be moving on to the next slide. That is
Sorry to interrupt, but we are not able to see the slides. Only the first screen is showing the first slide only.
Ma'am, it's presented. Just a second, ma'am. Is it visible, ma'am?
Yeah, now it is visible. Thank you.
Okay.
You can continue.
All right, ma'am. Wait a second. Yeah, it's visible, ma'am, right?
Yes, it is visible.
Shall I enlarge it, ma'am, or I just should let it be
No,
like
fine.
this?
It is fine. Fine.
It's fine. Okay, ma'am. As you can see, Shashi Deshpande, I have written that here, a feminist writer, but she hardly calls herself a feminist. She's an ardent reader, and prolific writer of par excellence. She's more of a womanist than a feminist. She has that radical attitude towards the suffering and subjugation of women in the society. She doesn't want to write more to the fictional world. She wants to capture the reality of the society, how women, that means in one of the interviews she has acknowledged that what I see around me I write. How impersonation and characterization, I must say, I must unpack the term impersonation. When any writer, a novelist, maybe any writer, maybe a poet, when someone describes any character, he takes that empathetic turn to churn the mindset of that author, of the particular character. And through this impersonation method, he or she becomes able to nudge out all there inside the psyche of that character. And predominantly, she writes on the educated, of course, I have missed out, middle class educated women. Her concern is like that. The next one, see, I have quoted some line. I don't like to call myself a feminist writer. I say I am a feminist, but I don't write to propagate an ism. And that ism is important. She doesn't want to fit herself in an ism. She wants to write, okay, just for this, as we have seen in the poetry section, poetry for poetry's sake, art for art's sake. She's writing for writing's sake. She doesn't want to fit herself, okay, in an ism in order to propagate any idea, that larger discourse of feminism, in which people write less and propagate more. A woman can never be angry. She can only be neurotic, hysterical, and frustrated. That way. That means she is probing the insight into the mind of the character. Why that woman is angry? We say on the surface level that a woman is angry, a girl is angry in the family, in the familial bond. But what's that reason? She is not at all angry. She is neurotic, hysterical, and frustrated. See, one of the critic, she has mentioned, Shashi Deshpande has minutely dealt with the phenomenon of arriving at the conclusion that women, after attaining all types of rights, are now struggling to adjust rather than get free from the traditional world. She deals with the middle class women who represents the majority and covers a wider area in modern society. I hope it is clear and it encompasses what Shashi Deshpande writes. Moving on to the next one, you see, we of course not forget the craftsmanship, okay, when we talk about Shashi Deshpande's writing. her that the way she maintains the first person and third person threads all together in the narrative. Her narratology, okay, and the narrative and narrator and the narrative, how they mix together, how when the third person leaves the thread and the third person again picks up the thread, and how she maintains, okay, and when it gets knotted and how at the end it gets unknotted. This technique is completely praiseworthy. It is neither completely in the first person narration nor completely in the third person narration. Rather, the narration of the novel swings backward and forward while the main plot of the story is interspersed with reminiscences of the past and the present happenings. So these you see how past and present scenes combine. Of course, all novelists nowadays they do that, but her take is that, of course, when she writes, how the tense from the language point of view, the flashback and flash forward, as we call the as Virginia Woolf, she tries her hand through the through a stream of consciousness when she's writing, when she's turning the mindset of the characters in her novels. But she's we can say that she writes and her memories, they just circle in the spring form, in which the edges of the spring they come together, okay, in order to have a single memory time and again. On that craftsmanship, David Lodge, he has commented, the simple way of telling a story is in the voice of a storyteller, which may be the anonymous voice of the folk tale or the voice of the epic bard, or the confiding, companionable, sententious, authorial voice of the classical fiction. That means she narrates the story in simple form. It seems to us it's simple form, but it's not that. It's not easy really that when she's writing. Her craftsmanship is simple to read, okay, but when you just probe inside from linguistic pattern, you'll see how she's maintaining each and everything.
Kindly make haste because you have already exceeded your time limit by 2 minutes. You just have 2 minutes.
Okay, ma'am. So I just want to point out that familial image I have discussed already in the that's the actually we talk about the actual functioning of the characters. I must say the characters of her novels, okay, The Dark Holds No Terrors, and I have also the another novel, That Long Silence. In these novels, the protagonist, what they are doing, actually they are aspiring figures. They are educated, but they are unable to break through their shackles of the patriarchy, because their male partners, they're not allowing them, okay, because they are feeling insecure. In one of the novels, okay, The Dark Holds No Terrors, even a woman has to go to the marital rape concept, okay, in which she's married, but because of that sexual sadism of her husband, she's facing that brutalities, okay, and that suffering. So these are these characters, they are of the opinion, they are representative of all those characters who are educated, but still they are stuck in the patriarchal society. That one, okay. Before I conclude, I must say that self-revelation, as it is observed by Jaya, the character in That Long Silence, as he says, self-revelation, that writing oneself is a cruel process. The real picture, the real you never emerges. The mirror is always treacherous. It shows you only what you want to see, and perhaps others to see in your faces only what, okay, they want to see. That's enough for me. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Vicky Prasad, for letting us know how patriarchy is keeping women in confinement and not allowing them that freedom, and they are then left to adjust only. Okay, moving on to our next presentation. Do we have Mr. Priyaranjan Das with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can start your presentation.
Ma'am, I don't have slide. I can read out, ma'am.
Yes, definitely you can.
Okay, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am and fellow participants. My paper of my presentation is Temsula House, These Hills Called Home, a story on Naga cultural identity. Naga identity, as I mean in this paper, is about the multi-ethnic group, those who live in Nagaland and the adjoining parts. There are almost a dozen of tribes, major tribes, they live in Nagaland, and they have a very unique culture, be it cuisine, be it costume, be it dance, be it storytelling, folk stories and others. They have a unique way of life. So they want to preserve it, and how the preservation of this identity leads to domination of other things like the rise of violence and the domination of female or feminine genders. So that kind of things I want to present in my paper. So the books that I have taken is Temsula House, these hills called home. From there I have taken 3 stories. One is, just a second. Yeah, one is Jungle Major. The second one is The Night. And the third one is The Pot Maker. So in 3 different stories, I want to prove a point that the preserving cultural identity leads to cultural consciousness. Cultural consciousness leads to violence or political movement. Political movement leads to violence. And also the violence leads to the rise of patriarchy, and how patriarchy crosses human relationship and also the femininity, the female counterparts. So the Jungle Major is a story about the Naga freedom fighters, the insurgent movements that started in the 60s and 70s that continued up to 80s. So it is about cultural nationalism and a freedom movement that is full of violence and bloodshed. I'm just putting one paragraph from that story, The Jungle Major, which tells about, vividly describes about violence that took place at that point of time. Some villages, I'm quoting now, some villages to which the underground leaders belonged were severely punished. The houses were ransacked by the security forces. The grains in their barns was burnt, and the people themselves were herded into camps away from the village and kept in a virtual imprisonment inside areas fenced in the bamboo stockades. This form of group insurrection was the famous grouping of village which the Nagas hated and dreaded even more than bullets. Numerous stories proliferated of women being molested by the security forces, and the obstinate ones who refused to give information being severely beaten. Not only that, sometimes they would be hung upside down and subjected to unspeakable tortures, like chili powder being rammed into their extremities. This is one paragraph from the story. The Jungle Major is telling about how the violence, the extreme violence was used against the Naga people, those who are against the security forces. So on this backdrop of violence, bloodshed, women being molested, what kind of human relationship could take place? That is the story. That this is on this backdrop. That is the another story I have taken. That is called The Night. The Night is a story about a man and a woman relationship. A woman, she was a girl, when she was hardly class 8, she was pregnant, but the lover refused to acknowledge that he is the father of that child. So the child was born, but it was out of wedlock. Then after some years, again the girl fell in love with another boy who was a contractor. Again, she was pregnant. In this case also, there was an extramarital relation. The man was married. So the wife of this lover, she called a meeting, and where the charge was leveled against this girl. So in that case, the aggrieved wife put a notice to the girl to take justice. So the male who was involved in this kind of relationship was not questioned by the society, not by questioned by his wife, not questioned by anyone, but the girl who was involved in this case was questioned. So I just wanted to read out 1-2 paragraphs to not 1-2 lines to show my point. An aggrieved wife, in this case the wife of the lover, had brought in charge against her breaking up a happy family by her promiscuous behavior with her husband. The charge was against the girl. On such occasion, village custom gave the aggrieved party a lot of leeway to hold abuses, including physical assault and imposition of a fine in case or kind. So in that case, the girl who was vulnerable, the girl who was pregnant, she was forced to come to the open to defend herself. So that is the case. The subjugation of the woman in this case, particularly the girl who was pregnant, uh, was given so much of mental and physical torture in that case. And even if a boy will be born, if the father will say that I doubt the parentage, then that son will become a bastard or the child of the street. It is told. And in the out tradition in Nagaland, Ao is a major tribe in Nagaland, they will not get any kind of recognition. That kind of child will not get any kind of recognition. That means not only the mother who is humiliated, but also the child will be humiliated throughout the life without the fault of the girl. So this is the second point. What I want to prove is that the cultural, in order to safeguard the cultural identity or preserving the cultural harmony, how the women are always at the other end to receive, at the receiving end. That is the second story that I have taken it. And that my last story is the pot maker. In this story, I want to prove that how the preservation of culture also, there is a monopoly of patriarchy in this case. The story is about a mother Arenla and her daughter Santilla. The mother does not want to pass on the knowledge of pot making because pot making is very difficult thing, and the mother wants that the girl should lead a good life instead of involved in pot making. Rather say weaving. Weaving is easier than pot making, so she wants her to take up weaving rather than pot making. But in this case, when the girl was interested to know about pot making and the mother does not want to give, then again the patriarchy, the elders of the society, the villagers in this case, was pushing the mother to let her know this art. The mother's point of view, I'm just putting it. I cannot even tell you how your back aches from carrying the heavy load uphill all the way to the village and then pounding the stubborn clay inside the bamboo cylinders to soften it. You have not felt how your left hand goes numb from holding it inside the moist clay, while the right one wielding the spatula screams in pain with every tap on the clay. What the mother wants to say is that pot making is a difficult job, and the daughter should not practice or should not learn that kind of art. Rather, she should know weaving. Weaving is a easier one. But the Gaburas, the village elders, they call the mother of Santilla and forces him that the mother should teach her daughter pot making because in that village the mother is a famous pot maker. She should pass on the knowledge to the daughter. It is compelled. She is compelled to pass on that kind of knowledge to the daughter. Otherwise, she will be fined. A hefty fine will be imposed on her because she is going against the tradition. So the tradition custom is also not about your own free choice. You have to do it. And who is dictating the terms? The patriarchy, the village elders, the Gamburas, and all those are forcing them. My conclusion by analyzing these three stories, my conclusion is that the unique identity and the urge to preserve it leads to cultural consciousness. And this cultural consciousness again leads to cultural nationalism. Cultural nationalism leads to political movement, an armed political movement perpetuates patriarchy. And because these three stories are written in the same time, in the same decade, in the same time frame, this patriarchy in turns take a toll or subjugates femininity or the woman counterpart. So it is a vicious circle. Not only that we want to preserve something, preserving means you are imposing something, some norm. It is not the self-preservation. You are imposing something. And when you are imposing this kind of thing, someone will have to take the toll. And who in this case is taking the toll? Be it human relationship, be it preserving the art and craft, be it the political movement. In the political movement is also violence, where the women have no place. In the art and craft, women are pushed to preserve that, be it weaving, be it pot making, they are forced to do it. And in the human relationship also, the man has no strings attached. Always the woman has to preserve the sanctity of womanhood. So this is what my findings of these three stories of these hills called home is all about. Thank you, ma'am, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Priyaranjan Das, for making this presentation. I would like to say that it is really sad to observe that the responsibility of preserving the culture and tradition and customs always lies with women, not men most of the times. And rather than preserving all such traditions which are harmful to women, we should try to change them. But it needs a lot of effort on the part of both men and women, and God knows when it will be achieved. But if people are educated, they can make changes, right? So
good evening, ma'am. I am Suja. My in the fifth 5 to 6 session, first name, my name, ma'am. But I didn't. You didn't call me, ma'am.
I'm sorry, you have not been registered in this session. There are
Suja, you are registered in room number 2. Room number, I think. And Suja,
this is
ma'am.
Conference room number 1.
Ma'am, I'm Dipali Soni. Actually, by mistake,
Dipali Soni, you were our first presenter, but you were not.
Yeah, because I by mistake joined room number 2.
Would you like to make a presentation? And,
yeah, ma'am. Yeah,
sorry to tell
I would
you,
like to make.
we do not have much time. So
Okay.
can you conclude it
So
in?
yeah, ma'am. Can you give me for only 5 minutes? I will finish my presentation in 5 minutes. Is it okay, ma'am?
Yes, you can start.
Yeah, ma'am. So my topic is, first of all, I want to give my introduction very briefly because we don't have much time. My name is Dipali Soni. I am assistant professor working in Department of English in Parul University, and I am also doing PhD in government Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University with guidance of Dr. Ami Upadhyay, ma'am. She is a vice chancellor, and I am also NET qualified. Now I am going to start my presentation about cultural studies in literature, a specific study on Lakshmi Narayanas and Me Hijras and Me Lakshmi book. Okay. So in the abstract, I have mentioned about as a woman's life document made it possible gain acceptance and the larger area. Transgender's life documents started to move up the graduation of recognition in the last many times. Women enjoy a fluid self, but a transgender enjoys double fluidity by transgendering heteronormative body, which is reflected in the narrative in the struggle of the Hijra community to establish Hijras, identify and day-to-day conflicts. Famed Hijra activity, Lakshminarayan Tripathi's benefactions have been immersed. The gender perspective is related to the idea of gender identity in society. Gender is not a natural and predetermined order, but the result of what places man and woman perform, assigning Tripaঠি's autobiography, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi through Butler's idea. This research paper concludes that Lakshmi questions and attempts to lessen the traditional notion and the gender places. Trans narrative develop a binary knowledge. They are not mirror of the cultural norms. Therefore, they have binary knowledge. Torn as culturally defined as self as different from the cultural definitions. And I want to discuss more, but as I am late, so that is the conclusion. Hello?
You can continue for 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. So basically, this book is translated, originally written in Marathi language. After that, this book is translated in English in Oxford University and also in Gujarati. Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi discussed her problems, her determinations in very detail in her autobiography. She also described discriminations, prostitutions, forced to leave parental home, and social exclusion. They are common problems faced by transgender. And after that, I have written about status of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi in Hijra, in Me Hijra Me Lakshmi book, transgender rights activism and Bharatanatyam. First transgender person to represent Asia Pacific in the UN in 2008, served on the boards of several NGOs which conduct LGBT activities work, and in 2007 started her own organization which promotes the welfare of sexual minorities. And that is all from me.
Okay, Miss Dipali Soni, thank you so much.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what I could derive from your presentation is that you wanted to say that if a person is different from culturally defined gender definition, then he or she has to face the angst and wrath of society. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, ma'am.
what you wanted to say?
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to say that
Okay,
their
thank you so much.
problems and their what they faced.
Yes, because the
What
society
are
is
the
not
difficulties in
open
this society? They
for
don't accept easily to them, transgender people. They are unable to get opportunities for employee and all.
Yes, definitely,
And
definitely.
also for education also.
Yes.
People
So,
look them to very differently. So that is
definitely,
all.
definitely.
Okay.
So that is all from this technical session. So now this
Yeah.
session is open for question answer session. If anybody has a question or a query, you can ask to any of the presenter.
Ma'am, I have a question, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Naseem Ahmed.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, paper publication is there. Is that paper, our paper be published in UGC care listed as Scopus?
I'm sorry, I don't have any information regarding this because I'm only chairing this session, and you can talk to the
okay, ma'am.
organizing committee.
Okay, ma'am.
If you have any question regarding this,
I
these
will drop message, ma'am. Yes.
any question from anybody? I would like to ask a question from Mr. Vicky Prasad. Is he available, Mr. Vicky?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
What, according to you, according to your perception, what is the culture? What do you understand by culture?
Yeah, I understand, ma'am. Personally, culture means that belief system, okay, that really makes anyone strive for its to the utmost ambition, without hindering his or her capabilities. I believe that. Maybe it's like, yeah, thriving in any sector, in any walk of life, ma'am. That's my definition of culture.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any other question? Anybody wants to ask anything? Okay, then thank you so much. That is all from this technical session.
Thank you,
I,
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
I thank the organizing committee for having me here to chair this session. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Archana, ma'am. For
Thank you,
having
ma'am.
you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Most welcome.
Yeah,
Most welcome. Thank you so much.
It is really a productive session, and all your suggestions and valuable insights are very useful to us. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It's my
Yeah.
pleasure.
It's
Thank you
in
so
the,
much.